Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a fabulous NJ.com Facebook Live panel. What you need to know about New Jersey's legal weed market, hosted by NJ Cannabis Insider, a premium experience from NJ.com, featuring a who's who of some of the brightest minds in the cannabis world. Our esteemed panel will break it down for us today and answer the questions that's on everyone's mind. When will New Jersey open up for cannabis sales? And what can we expect when that day comes? I'm Suzette Parmley, cannabis reporter for NJ.com and the Star Ledger, and member of the NJ Cannabis Insider staff. Powered by NJ.com, NJ Cannabis Insider is a weekly premium insider trade journal that goes into the ins and outs of the industry and is offering you a year-round, multi-year conferences, webinars, and networking opportunities for an established and growing community of like-minded professionals. Our events are proven points of entry to understanding the billion-dollar medical marijuana, hemp, and legal weed industries, an economic opportunity unrivaled in modern New Jersey history. We have a business networking event coming up next week in Jersey City and a conference in March in Carteret. Click the link in the chat for more information and to register. And again, for our main event today is an hour-long panel discussing the ins and outs of what's to happen in the coming weeks and months with the highly anticipated cannabis industry in New Jersey. We will break the program down into two segments. The first will be an update on rules and regulations featuring Ed DeVoe, president of the New Jersey Cannabis Association, Rob Mejia of Stockton University, and Jessica Gonzalez of law firm Hiller PC based out of New York. The second discussion will focus on consumption with Brian Sikora, general manager of the Botanist, New Jersey, Cecilia Oyadaran, an associate at Foley Hoag's National Cannabis Practice Group, and Lizzie Kirschenbaum, associate director of government relations at Weed Maps, which provides mapping locations via weedmaps.com. And we will dedicate a time of each at the end of each panel for Q&A from our audience. You can ask and submit any questions you have in the chat throughout the discussion, and we'll pick a few at the end and answer them for you. And before we dive into our esteemed panel, we want to thank our sponsor, The Botanist. The Botanist is a retail and product brand created to help wellness seekers. They're there to listen and help guide patients and consumers as they discover cannabis and the power of herbal wellness. You can find them at various licensed dispensaries throughout the Mid-Atlantic, New England, and Midwest. In New Jersey, you can find them in 3 locations: in Williamstown, Atlantic City, and Egg Harbor Townships. They also sell products in their own branded The Botanist retail locations. So again, thank you so much for The Botanist. And let's get started with our first panel, the rules of the cannabis game. The New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission, CRC, is charged with setting those rules and is in the midst of reviewing license applications. With us today is Ed DeVoe, president of NJ Cannabis Association, which touts responsible job growth in a responsible and burgeoning, what is to soon grow, New Jersey cannabis industry. And we have Jessica Gonzalez, an attorney at Hiller PC based out of New York, who will discuss the licensing applications from the legal standpoint. And of course, Rob Mejia, adjunct professor of Stockton University's Cannabis Studies Department. Let me start with you, Ed. We're hearing stories out there and reading stories out there about that the CRC is in the midst of approving applications. And when can we realistically expect to begin buying cannabis in New Jersey, Ed?
Thank you so much, Suzette, and thank you for having me, NJ Cannabis Insider, and glad to see my esteemed colleagues on the panel. Look, yesterday, right? Everyone wanted this to happen yesterday. The CRC actually rolled back the February 22nd date, which was actually published some time ago. And I used the term that the 22nd was a milestone. Others in the industry corrected me and they said, no, it's not a milestone, it's a must, because it was in the language in the statute. But I want to take a step back just for a moment and say, I do call it more of a milestone. The 22nd of February was more of a milestone, and give kudos to the legislature for creating statute and give kudos to the CRC for creating regulation, but more importantly, the statute. If you notice, there's no penalty in the statute for missing that date. And look, there's no such thing as perfect public policy. And so given the notion that there should be a milestone, that we should have targets for this industry, there was a target that was produced, but according to the CRC, we're not going to make it. That's not the end of the world. What I think we have to look forward to is adult use sales. Maybe it's not tomorrow, certainly not yesterday, but it's not going to be another year. We have way too much invested. We have way too much involved, not only because of the current license holders, the 12 original ATCs or alternative treatment centers, but we do have other license winners that are in the process of getting their businesses established and motivated and activated. So look, it's not February 22nd, according to the CRC. It's not the end of the world, and it's not going to be so far out in the future that we need to be disappointed as a state and as an industry.
So if not February 22nd, Ed, what is a realistic time frame? Next few weeks, next couple months? Just give our audience a sense out there that are wondering, when can I go and buy weed? I mean, when do you think is a realistic timeline, or do we know?
Yesterday. No, so right, there are enough people out there that are active. I'm not saying that they're licensed, but people are out there, they're active, and many of those groups that are out there that are active, it's a reality, and I'm speaking in very real terms to our audience. It's not going to be tomorrow, but it's not going to be so far out into the future. So realistically, I could say it's any day. But look, let's give the CRC a chance through their next meeting. Their next meeting is in February the 24th, I believe, and let them address it then. And I think it would be great on their part if they did in fact address a new deadline. So that's a suggestion here live on Facebook. So let's give until February 24th and see what comes up.
Terrific. And I know the application review process is extensive, it's complicated. Everyone knows this, but what remains to be done by the CRC as they're reviewing applications? Do you have a sense of what are the final hurdles here?
So this is an evolving process. It's an evolving industry. I don't think that there's any last item to ticket punch. I think where we are is this evolutionary process where you have existing companies, you have existing growers, you have growers that are about to come online, you have product that needs to be tested, you have product that could in fact begin to populate the adult use market. And I think that the CRC is taking its time and addressing those first and foremost safety issues and health issues that need to be addressed when it comes to putting a consumable out into the public. After you get past the safety and health standards and you punch those items on the punch list, then it's making sure that the municipalities are in fact ready for this adult use market. And so I think with all things considered, that the municipalities have been evolving throughout this 4 or 5 year process, especially in the last year. So again, it could be any day now, but realistically, let's say it's after February. Let's say it's after the CRC meeting. Hopefully they give us some indication of what their new sense of timing is, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much, Ed. And I'm going to have Jessica take it from here. You heard Ed discuss the municipal aspect of this. Municipal approval is crucial. We've had stories on NJ.com on the front pages of the Star Ledger recently, which I think I wrote, on where municipal approval is so crucial that is one of the obstacles that the CRC is going through right now. They don't have enough municipal approval on these applications. Jessica, walk us through, as a mayor, town official, what is the process I'm going to have to do to make sure my town can opt in and provide and offer cannabis within my borders? What is that process?
Sure. So the process is simply to pass an ordinance allowing cannabis establishments to operate within your town borders. But it's important to note that just because you're opting into allowing cannabis establishments doesn't mean that you're opting into all six. So the towns do have the discretion to sort of take this a la carte method and say, well, we'll allow cultivators and processors, but we don't want anybody selling cannabis here. Or we will allow retailers, but we don't really want anybody growing or processing in our backyard. So it's important to note that when applicants are searching for municipalities, that just because you've read somewhere in an article that they are opting in does not mean that they're opting in for every single license type. The only thing that municipalities cannot ban is the delivery of cannabis and cannabis products within their town. But I really have to stress the point that there's a lot of applicants who get really disappointed because they look into a town and all of a sudden it's, well, they're only allowing cultivators and processors. But in the statute itself, the towns have the utmost discretion to enact any endorsement requirements they want. So they can let you know how when you can open, when your stores have to close, how far away you have to be from a school, a place of worship, a substance abuse center. They can also cap the number of licenses as well, which is important. So when anybody's reading these ordinances, there is a lot of difference between our different towns. And I know that everybody on this panel probably get asked, hey, do you know if this town is opted in or out? There's 565 municipalities in New Jersey, so that's 565 mini governments that we're all trying to keep track of. And so ordinances are the best way. And, one thing that I would like to see that we're seeing in New York is mandating that every borough and every town actually file their ordinance with the Office of Cannabis Management so that it's easily accessible to everybody in terms of who's opting in, who's opting out, and what the law is. Because if anybody's been to these municipal websites, some of them seem like they haven't been updated since the 90s, and it's very difficult to find the most updated ones. So I'm going to make the same ask along jumping off of Ed over here, in that I would hope that the commission may try to establish a system where these towns are going to be mandated to put forth their ordinances. I think it will just make it easier and a more transparent process.
Now, a big part of the legislation and legalizing cannabis was the tax revenue promise, social justice issues, and tax revenue for these towns. Jessica, what is in it for a mayor that opts in, and what type of money or revenue are we talking about here on the sales tax of cannabis?
Sure. So every municipality can enact their own sales tax, but they are capped at how much they can. So for cultivators, processors, and retailers, they are capped at 2%. So it can be 0.5%, 1%, but they're capped at 2%. For wholesalers, I believe it's 1%. But there's also the 70% of all tax revenue that is supposed to go to impact zones. So if any municipality has been identified as an impact zone, they're now looking at another stream of cannabis tax revenue. And on the same token, if the CRC implements its discretion to enact the social equity excise fee on the cultivator level, that too will also go to these impact zone municipalities. But if you're not an impact zone, you really are going to be limited to who's allowed in your town. So it could behoove a lot of these towns who are either have deficits or who are looking for, another stream of income to allow multiple cannabis establishments that they can take advantage of all of this tax revenue that may be coming in. And what I've been telling a lot of folks who are trying to apply in towns who have opted out is, listen, just because they've opted out, that doesn't mean that it's permanent. A lot of them are still in the process of working things out, but a lot of towns did opt out before regulations came forth, because unfortunately, the same deadline that the commission had to put forth as regulations was the same deadline that towns had to either opt in or opt out. So to reserve their rights to opt in the way that they see fit, a lot of them opted out, but it's not permanent. And for the ones that are really stubborn and really don't want this, I also don't think that's permanent, because the moment they start seeing bordering municipalities with all this tax revenue coming in and seeing their residents, for example, Union City, Jersey City has not capped licenses. Union City's a hard no, but Hoboken and Jersey City and Secaucus are allowing, or actually Secaucus, no, are allowing it. So they're going to be completely enveloped by these towns that are getting this tax revenue, and they're going to see their residents going to these other towns and bringing it back into their town. So to me, it just behooves a lot of these municipalities to just do it the way that they want to do it, but to listen to your constituents, right? We have to go back to, what did the voters vote for? And cannabis won in every single county in New Jersey. It was the most historic and the most successful cannabis campaign in the country. And I think some of the frustrations that constituents are having is our towns aren't listening to us.
Final note on that, Jessica. What has been your biggest advice to your clients at Hiller, and when they're asking you all these questions, or to these municipalities? What is your biggest advice?
So my biggest advice to them is, you have to come forth with solutions to these towns. You have to put your best foot forward. You have to get, out of the shadows and into the sunlight. My best advice is, make yourself out to be that cannabis expert. You have to understand who you're talking to. You have to know your audience. These municipal officials, some of them, it's a part-time job. For other ones, it's a full-time job. Other ones, it's part salary. Other ones, it's full salary. You have to understand that they're dealing with a whole lot of municipal issues that have nothing to do with cannabis. And so they may not understand this industry the way that you do. They may not understand the regulations or the process or how we got here. They may not understand what obstacles you're facing. Some of these towns we're seeing, especially on the zoning aspect, are making real estate very limited, but they may not understand that, in terms of what these applicants need. So the best thing you have to do is, you have to engage in that municipal process. And I know that there are certain, lobbyists, and I know sometimes I'm called in to assist, but you have to remember, if you're going to be a CEO of your company, an officer of your company, you're going to need the town's help and support, not just for municipal approval, but even after you get the license. That's when the real hard work begins. So you need to make yourself out. You need to invest in yourself. You need to educate yourself. You need to make yourself out to be that cannabis expert that they go to and say, hey, we're going to put forth this ordinance, or hey, this is how our application is going to move forward. What do you think? And I've been very successful with a lot of my clients in making them out to be and empowering them to become that cannabis expert. If you can bring solutions to your town, you're going to have a lot more of an impact than if you just bring complaints about, why are you not allowing this? They may just not know. It may just be a lack of education, a lack of attention, a lack of time. So I don't think that we should automatically assume that there's any sort of insidious intent behind towns not allowing it or not being transparent. They may not know. So let's educate them. This is an opportunity for you as a CEO or as an applicant to make yourself out to be that cannabis pinpoint person.
Terrific. Thank you, Jessica. Speaking of experts, Stockton University has its own on cannabis. Rob Mejia, let's go to you. I know you were instrumental in setting up and leading the hemp cannabis internship program at the university, and are a fountain of knowledge on real estate issues concerning cannabis, which Jessica just touched on. How competitive is it out there, Rob, for these spaces to accommodate all these new retail outlets and expanding dispensaries? Because this is going to be a huge market. Tell me a little bit about the demand right now for space.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I do want to backtrack for one very quick minute when people talk about tax revenue that the cities will get. I think we are too focused on just the sales tax. So if you look at something like a $2 million figure, for example, from that, 2% of that is only $40,000. And that is such a drop in the bucket. And also, for the first year that a program is in place, you will have a lot of expenses. A lot of that money will go to your police department to start with, because there's things they have to do. They may have to do extra patrols. They may have to handle traffic. Your township may be wise and they may set up a cannabis liaison or a cannabis business development office that they want to invest some of that money in. So I think just looking at the sales tax is kind of short-sighted. There's two other elements that I think will bring economic benefit to the towns. One is you can actually incentivize the people that come in for your cannabis businesses to work with local operators. If you look at a build out, for example, of a small dispensary, you could look at a dispensary about 2,500, 3,500 square feet. You could maybe get that up and going for about a $300,000 build. Well, that's a decent amount of money when you're hiring local plumbers, electricians, pavers, et cetera, all the people you need to build out your facility. Those are jobs in your community. Those are good paying jobs. Then along that same line, you'll have to have employees. Well, if you work with a union, if you offer a livable wage, you're also offering a lot of benefit to your, hopefully to your citizens there as well. So I think when you look at economic impact for townships, if I were in there presenting, I would say, yes, we have to talk about sales tax, but then let's talk about working with local providers and let's talk about developing a local workforce. So that was just one thing I would put on the table. To your
We heard
question,
from Ed and Jessica, that the market can open up anytime. The CRC is still doing its job and doing its work. Is it too late for me as an investor and operator to go find spaces? Are still choices out there for me to get a space right now, or is it too late?
well, there's two kind of areas that you would look at. So first, you do look at the places that have opted in. But again, that's only about 20% of all the townships. So you can imagine, so if you started with that 20% and then you looked at where the zoning was, and then you looked at which of the 6 categories of licenses that they provide, that is a very limited market. And I can guarantee you that everybody who has real estate in those areas, they've been called, and they've been called several times. So I would say if you are looking at existing areas, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for you to find the real estate because it is essentially capped by zoning and by what licenses they allow. But to Jessica's point, I think the thing that you can do, there's 80% of the cities, of the townships out there that have not opted in. How about if you try to get them to opt in? And you do that through education. You try to educate them on what the businesses look like, what the benefits can be, where they could fit within that township. And especially if you are a citizen of that township or one of the adjoining townships, hopefully you have a stake in that community already. Hopefully they already know you as a business person or a volunteer coach somewhere, or you know somebody on the city council. So use your education, use your influence, make your case, and try to develop your real estate that way. I think that actually might be it as a challenging route, but not as impossible as trying to compete with everybody else who I can guarantee you in the towns has called the 5 people who have places that they could be renting to you or selling to you.
Terrific. Now, I've gotten this in several emails, Rob. It's an issue on people's minds. Some readers are a little irate, or I should say anxious. They're wondering, I need cannabis for medical reasons. Now we're opening it up for adult recreational use. The big question, is there going to be enough weed out there to serve both populations when the market does open up for sales?
Well, we've seen historically in every other state where you transfer from a medical only program up to an adult use program, that there are hiccups, that there are issues, that there are things that you have to address. I actually like to think that I like to try to provide solutions. So I would look at some things that have actually worked to sort of mitigate the issues. It's never going to be perfect. There will not be a rollout where everybody will get exactly what they want. But a couple of things that you can do is some of the dispensaries have offered special provisions for medical patients. And by that, I mean they will offer hours where only medical patients can shop. So maybe that's earlier in the morning where they get 2 hours where they can shop. They also, if you have any kind of lines, you have the adult use line, maybe that's going for 2-3 blocks or whatever. If you are a medical patient, you go to the front of the line and you are served first. Also, you can do limits. So there could be temporary limits. So when you start for adult use, maybe the people who shop there only get a 1/4 ounce could be a limit. So that way you're trying to preserve the product for the medical patients. And I would also say via an online system, you could probably set something up where the medical patients can reserve the medicine that they need. Specifically, if there's a certain strain, there's a certain product, they can put in an order, maybe that's held for them for a short amount of time. So again, there are ways that you can serve the medical population first, and that is primary. The other thing that we need to do as I know early on that Senator Scutari said that he was not in favor of home grow because he thought that some of that product would end up in the underground market, but that he also recognized the need for medical patients to get access. And so that's why he was in support of delivery, which at that point years ago was actually not as common as it is now. So I do think we also need to ramp up delivery, and delivery would be a great way to serve the medical population, and especially people who might be immobile or people who have difficulty getting to the limited number of dispensaries that we have. So again, there's going to be hiccups. There will be some things that'll be ugly when you go from the medical market to the adult use market. But I think by putting some or all these measures in place, we can kind of mitigate it. And then you will see that it will normalize after a while. We have cultivators who are growing hard. We have people who are expanding. We know that there's a dearth of product. We also need to step up our testing. So we can do it. And I think if we put these measures in place, we can at least make it a little more smoother, but it will never be perfect.
Terrific. Regardless of the concerns right now, that you're confident there is going to be plenty of weed for everybody.
I wouldn't say plenty, but again, yeah, you do have to do things like the limits to start, and you do have to encourage the cultivators to get product going. You have to move on delivery. So I think it will be a tight supply, as it always is when you first make that transfer. But I do think eventually, yes, I do think that we will have options.
Thank you so much for our panelists for the first segment. Terrific insight, great expertise. And again, I'd like to thank the Botanist for sponsoring this fine panel. I think we have time for a few questions from our online viewers, and we'll take a look at a few of them. Let's see. So we have one coming from, let's see. We have a Q&A coming from, let me see. Tony Jones wants to know, is it legal to smoke on the street or in your car without being stopped or questioned by the police under this new law? Anybody can chime in on that. Again, is it legal to smoke on the street or in your car without being stopped or questioned by the police?
So I will chime in here. No, so not in public places. New Jersey has that in the statute that you are not allowed to consume in public places. This is very different from our neighbors right across the river, New York, where yes, you are allowed to smoke anywhere where tobacco is allowed to be smoked. And this is a really excellent point for why consumption lounges are 100% necessary. And this is a municipal issue because I think we've only seen maybe like 8 or 9 or 10 municipalities actually opting into consumption lounges for the fear that these are going to be these, party centers where people can go. And I've been in hearings where folks have said, well, these consumption lounges is where people can smoke and drink and party. And I said, no, actually, that's not the case. And I'm like, well, what you're describing is a bar. You can find those in many municipalities. So, unfortunately, you're not allowed to consume in public places. And if you are renting, your landlord can also prohibit you from vaping, aerosoling, or inhaling tobacco. So it really, there's very limited places where somebody, can actually, consume, which is why I think we should continue to push for consumption lounges, especially in the municipal level, because that's what I've seen in terms of opting in. Consumption lounges are, for the most part, being prohibited in a lot of these towns.
Stay on that real quick, Jessica, because John Kern wants to know, what exactly is a cannabis lounge?
Sure. So cannabis consumption lounges, they're tied to a retail location. So if you get a class 5 retail license, you can then apply for a permit or an endorsement from your town to open up a cannabis consumption lounge. Some folks do believe that it is its own license type. It is not. The confusion is New York has its own license type that is for cannabis consumption. In Jersey, it has to be connected to a retail, but only if your town is actually going to allow it. And as we've seen, not many towns are actually allowing it. Once again, I think it's just a lack, of education, but it does become a health issue, and it's also a social justice issue, because if the purpose and the intent behind this law was, 1, to provide access to alternative medicine, and 2, to cut off that proximity between communities of color and, and police, if you are not allowing them to consume outside, they cannot consume if they are renting. Consumption lounges provide this safe space. And if anybody's been to a consumption lounge, it's a place where I have felt safe. I, as a female, wouldn't particularly feel safe sitting by myself in a bar, but I felt safe sitting by myself in a consumption lounge out west because it's regulated. There's cameras, there's security. They provide you with water. Some of them are typically timed in terms of how long you can be there. So I think it's just a matter of walking up these municipalities and these municipal officials through what it actually looks like. And what it is, it's a safe space for people to consume. And if a lot of these towns are concerned about, having cannabis smoke and the smell and the odor, well, why not allow people, the sort of watering hole where they can go to and consume legally and safely? It just makes sense.
And also in the consumption lounges, they do not serve any alcohol.
Or food.
Nor food. You can't have alcohol or can't have food. But I do think there is kind of a social disconnect between people envisioning people smoking cannabis and then going somewhere, possibly in their car or otherwise, versus a bar where we know exactly what that happens as well. So there is definitely cannabis, once again, is treated very unequally than other substances. But you do find a lot of people that have hesitation about the consumption lounges.
Right. How many bars have parking lots?
Right. Now, several audience viewers want to know along those lines, do they even have to go to a lounge? Can they grow cannabis at home? And can it be homegrown?
No, we do not have any home grow provisions in New Jersey at the moment. There are a lot of people who are pushing for it, especially for medical patients, because they often need to grow a certain strain for their particular condition. And also because of the price of cannabis that could be prohibitive to medical patients. So the short answer is there are very, very stiff penalties for growing even a single plant. And if you get up around 5 plants, you would be stunned at the kind of time and or fines that you would be facing. So short answer is there is no home grow in New Jersey. We are one of the few states that is allowing for legal adult use that does not have a home grow provision. And I hope we change that soon.
Ed, we have a question from Chante who wants to know what are the criteria for selecting who will be issued licenses to operate? I know it's a complicated question. Can you give an answer to Chan on what exactly are the criteria for getting a license?
Well, the primary criteria are having site control in a very broad sense. So this is the very broad answer. Site control, a municipal resolution. This is a change from the former processes where a letter of support sufficed. Now you need a township resolution. I haven't actually been in the application portal myself to see what the applications look like, but from what I understand is that even though it's an automated process, much of the documentation that you needed years ago is still necessary. You're still going to need history disclosures or PhDs. You're still going to need to identify your organization, what type of organization you are, and who's going to be working in your organization. One of the good announcements that came early in the life of the CRC was that if you are a minority woman or veteran applicant, not that you're guaranteed a license, but your application moves to the front of the line for consideration. And that is in line with the legislative intent and regulatory intent that communities that have been historically disadvantaged by unequal and uneven policing and poor public policy with respect to the cannabis industry, that these communities will in fact be given at least preferential treatment in terms of their licenses being viewed first. And then you also have other types of applications, be they micro licenses, where the micro category was conceived by lowering the bar to entry into the industry, as well as conditional licenses, where if you are a particular class of applicant, you can make application for a cannabis operation and not have site control. And you have 120 days to cure things like that. So what does it take to get a license? I think having basic business acumen, putting together a solid application, answer the questions that are asked in the application portal, and answer them to the best of your ability.
Yeah,
And
so
Michael Bailey-
sorry, I was going to say, so I'm going to, the way that I try to phrase it, because just to summarize everything that you would need for the application, we'd be here for quite some time. But the notice of application acceptance lists out exactly what you need. So for the listeners on here, just Google New Jersey CRC notice of applications. It is 30 pages. It lists out what you need for a conditional license versus what you're going to need for an annual license. That is your governing document. 30 pages, it's not painless, it's not heavy lifting. But when you're looking at application, I typically like to simplify it to 4 buckets. The first one is team. You need a team. This isn't necessarily something you're going to be able to do alone. Number 2, funding. If you're putting forth, an elaborate business plan, you have to show that you have the funds to justify your business plan, as well, and your build out plans as well. The next one is for site control, and that comes with, municipal approval, zoning approval, proof that you will have final control over this property upon you receiving a license. And 4, intellectual property, and that comes down to your standard operating procedures, any trade secrets that you might have, trademarks, copyright, all of that needs to be brought in there, but very, very heavy on standard operating procedures. So if anybody sees what SOPs are, that's exactly what they're asking for. They want to understand, are you going to be compliant with New Jersey laws? But there is a difference in the application process between a conditional and an annual, and it's all broken down in the notice of application acceptance.
Jessica, Michael Bailey wants to know what's being done about the lack of minority applicants, or is there anything to help them get, their application through if they're a minority applicant? Where do things stand on that, on the applicants? And is there a dearth of minority folks seeking licenses or have gotten licenses?
So to be clear, no adult use licenses have been issued. And I know that there's this story going around that no Black applicants have received licenses, and there's a big uproar about it. But what people need to understand is that was the 2019 medical license that was not pursuant to the new medical bill, that the J. Koenig Act. It was not pursuant to our Cannabis Adult Use Act. It was not pursuant to the regulations. It was pursuant to an old medical bill that was drafted back in 2012. So a lot of these micro licenses, the 15% goal allocation for minority, 50% for women and disabled veteran, none of that really came into play. Now, while that's not particularly an excuse, I want to make it very clear to everybody that this number that we were discussing is not for adult use. It was for the medical licenses that were held in abeyance for close to 2.5 years. One, I also haven't seen the data on those 56. I don't know if the CRC has actually issued who exactly, is the makeup of a lot of these companies. So it's really difficult to say one way or another because we don't really have those reports and we don't have that data. But moving forward, because we saw what happened in 2018, we've seen what happens. A lot of us advocated to make sure that minority representation was a thing in the New Jersey cannabis industry and that these applicants had a meaningful opportunity to participate. And that's why we advocated for the priority system, which Ed was discussing before, which is also in the notice of application. It'll show you exactly where you stand in the priority system. 2, we have, the percentage allocations. 3, this is why the conditional licenses and the micro licenses made it into the bills as well. This is why there's the social equity applicant status that we have, in our regulations that we didn't have, in the statute. And now there's also guardrails that are placed in the regulations where the CRC is now including themselves and involving themselves in the contractual relationships, which we haven't seen in any other state. So I think it's important that while I'm hearing, a lot of this uproar, we have to understand which rounds we are talking about and the strides that we have made over the past years, and really all of these really phenomenal guardrails that we have in place in the CRC that are meant to protect not just, minority owned businesses, but small and local and entrepreneur businesses as well.
Thank you so much. Excellent panelists. Thank you again. Superb job. Thank you. So we're going to segue into our second panel now. And it's going to be hard to top that first panel, but our batch of next panels might give it a shot. Let's turn our attention to consumption. Once that market does open up, what can we buy and where can we buy it? And answer questions on that front from our online viewers. With us are three experts at making, are in the business of making customers happy. We have Brian Sikora, General Manager of The Botanist, again, a medical dispensary in New Jersey, which happens to be our panel sponsor. Cecilia Oyadaran, an associate in law firm Foley Hoag's National Cannabis Practice. The law firm is headquartered in Boston with offices in New York, Paris, and Washington, D.C., and it's been around for 7 decades. And third, we have Lizzie Kirschenbaum, an Associate Director of Government Relations at Weed Maps, which provides adult use and cannabis marijuana dispensary locations via weedmaps.com. Brian, let's start with you.
Okay.
You there?
Yep.
Okay. Once your facility opens as an expanded alternative treatment center, ATC, which will also cater to the adult recreational market, what will your product offerings be?
Well, yeah, thank you first of all for the opportunity to be on the panel. And I really enjoyed the last panel discussion, learned a few things along the way. The regulations are pretty thick at times, and you miss some things on 2 or 3 readings. So that was really helpful. Thanks to that group. I think it's important to remember that when we start rec, it's not going to look a whole lot different product-wise from what we have today, right? So, if anybody's really interested in specifically seeing what the CRC has adopted as our acceptable products, it's section 11.5 of the CRC regs that, lays out what the products will look like. And if you read it, it's pretty much the products that we have available to us today. There's nothing in there about, baked goods and things like that. I think that's a down the road type of product offering. While the Regulatory Commission has laid out, here's what the products are, they also have the phrase in here, power to waive these requirements. So, like anything, if you bring a creative product offering to the state, they will take a look at it and potentially adopt it. Whether or not it's kind of clearly articulated in these goals. I think it's important to remember that the CRC really is our partner in this. That I think sometimes it should be the CPC instead of the CRC. That while they're regulating what we're doing, they're also our partner in us trying to make this program as successful as possible. So the more successful we are out on the operational level, the more successful their program will be. So I think they will work with us, bringing this back to products. I think they will work with us to develop the products that we think that, will resonate within the market, always with an eye on maintaining, that safe quality product that people rely on as their medicine. So I think that's, that is not a negotiable with them, that, the products, whether it's going to be rec or whether it's going to continue to be medical, have to be at the highest level quality, and they're going to ensure that through a testing regimen that will be adopted, similar to what we're doing now, slightly a little bit more strict or stringent, but it'll still be, the products will all be tested whether it's medical or rec.
So if I walk into one of your facilities at the Botanist, Brian, what's going to change in the design? Is it going to be one big room, or is it going to be a separate area for medical patients and a separate lounge area for the recreational cannabis adult users?
Yeah, I think my neighbor Rob over at Stockton, hi Rob, already laid out a lot of the things that we're adopting, and that we plan to adopt. Look, we serve 500 customers a day at our stores. We need to make sure that there's a methodology that we can give those 500 patients priority over what could be another 500 people coming that day looking for their products, and we know that as Jessica pointed out, this is resoundingly popular with the state, with the vote, and we expect there to be a rush those first couple days. So for things that Rob had already pointed out, designated hours, designated turnstiles, different lines, kind of think airport, think of TSA pre-check, those types of opportunities with our medical patients. Ensuring, basically changing some of our POS structure so that we're making sure that the inventory is correctly allocated, so that we're not selling the same weed twice, that we are also making sure that it's available for our medical patients. That's another topic that we're discussing now, how we're going to implement that. And it's really coming down to smart inventory management and smart point of sale crowd management, to be honest with you, at first, and ensuring that the medical patients have priority. We will have, based on our locations, some separate SOPs at each location based on the physical structure of the building, but the objective of all of those SOPs is to provide a prioritization for our medical patients from both product and service over our recreational patients, without chastising our recreational patients. Don't get me wrong, but we need to just make sure we have that product available and that accessibility. And that may change from hour to hour throughout the day, how we allocate our POS stations, our point of sale stations, so that we're making sure we have enough people, spots available for our medical patients when they walk in.
So have you, I guess the term would be, have you stockpiled additional inventory or supply in anticipation of this big day? I know a lot of facilities have, the ATCs have.
Yeah, I mean, Rob kind of touched on it a little bit. It's not a market that has been oversaturated with supply, so it's been a little tight in New Jersey over the last 3 years I've been involved with this. But I think the blessing, if there is one in the delay, is that a lot of people were talking about recreational starting back when I did my budget, 16 months ago. Q4, Q4 of 2021, we better get ready for it because rec's going to happen. Well, we're sitting in Q1 of 2022 and it still hasn't happened yet. But some of the ATCs, I can't speak for all of them. I know a couple others that have, they got ready. We got ready. We did expansions. We did cultivation expansions and manufacturing expansions. And so I feel like there's, that we'll be as ready as we can be, and that we do have some inventory now. And I know that other ATCs have that. I know that the CRC needs to be, looking at the whole state as a whole and looking at different regions and totally understand that decision, that you don't want to overwhelm one set of dispensaries with everybody coming there at once. But I think, people have been cognizant about this coming, and so they've made the necessary investments along the way to make sure that we're ready for it. Is it a stockpile? I wouldn't go that far, but we do have inventory that we've intentionally, kind of set aside, knowing that this was going to happen and making sure that we're ready.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Brian. Cecilia, I know with all this new business anticipated, there's also not a dearth of questions coming online now regarding zoning, land use, real estate law. Foley Hoag has an established cannabis practice. And from your standpoint as a cannabis regulatory attorney, what are you noticing? What are the questions coming in? What's the tenor out there right now, Cecilia, from what you're seeing?
Yeah, so our new and existing cannabis clients have been keeping us quite busy, which is always a good thing when you're an attorney. And, the more clients, the merrier. And so we've definitely seen a large uptick in clients looking for application assistance. As Jessica and Ed pointed out previously, these applications are pretty extensive, and clients are looking for assistance, whether it's project management or helping to draft narratives and review application narratives to make sure that they're in line with the regulations. And in addition to application writing and the areas you previously mentioned, we also have clients coming to us for advice on structuring partnerships and to review applicant contracts, such as management services agreements and financial source agreements, which are like loan agreements, to ensure that they're in compliance with the regulations. And of course, our existing clients who currently operate alternative treatment centers in New Jersey continue to come to us with a range of regulatory questions to ensure compliance under both the medical regs and the adult use regs. And we've also been fielding a lot of questions from potential clients who are starting from square one. And the advice we usually give to folks who are starting from square one is to first really start to think about the business mechanics. How much am I going to need to start the business? Will I have partners in the business? Who do I need on my team? Do I need investors? And to really make sure you develop and fine tune your business plan, because not only is that plan required for the application, but having a solid, well put together business plan will also be helpful when seeking investors and potential business partners, because that's what they want to see.
So before I even step into your office or seek you as counsel on this, what do I need lined up? What are the ducks I need lined up before I even call you or visit your offices? What do I need to do?
Well, you can call us anytime. So you don't have to worry about that. But I will say and advise, that it's important to really think about how you're sort of marshaling your resources, right? I mean, it can be quite an expensive process. And, even though the CRC has done a great job of trying to put out license fees that are, on a scale and aren't a barrier to entry, you still want to make sure that you're spending your resources wisely. So I definitely recommend, in addition to honing on your business plan, starting to talk to your officials. As Jessica and Ed pointed out, municipal support is crucial and you can't get a license without it. So making sure you're starting to develop those relationships and also looking at property, I think, are things that are really important to start doing before you start trying to dive into the application.
Terrific. Excellent legal guidance. Thank you, counsel. And speaking of guidance, Weed Maps does a lot of that for cannabis consumers, operators, and potential investors through weedmaps.com. Lizzie, what can you share from your end? What are you seeing as far as location, likelihood of where these places are for adult use and medical dispensaries? Where are they being located most often these days? Are they near urban populations? Are they near major highways, arteries? Give us your perspective from what Weed Maps puts out there. What can we expect, or what are we seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, let me just say it's a real privilege to be here today. So thank you so much for having me. I think when it comes to the medical dispensaries, you saw in just the most recent round of awards that those licenses were awarded based on region. So we saw a good dispersion of licenses in both the north, the south, as well as central New Jersey. When it comes to adult use, we're dealing with a whole different ballgame. As my esteemed panelists have already mentioned, New Jersey has an opt-out clause. So we're looking at towns that have decided to opt in versus towns that have decided to opt out. And a lot of this was in part determined by party lines, but a real factor that pushed a lot of towns to opt out before the deadline was that they weren't given very much time to review the regulations. So they wanted to wait and actually get through those regulations before making a decision here. And then the second piece is some towns have adopted what I call wait and see approach, where they want to just wait and see, what does this look like in the town next door to mine before we start welcoming cannabis businesses to our own town. And what I can tell these towns, even before they get the chance to see it themselves, is they're going to see that the towns next to them are benefiting from job creation, from getting that tax revenue. They're going to have the healthy kind of tourism and a decrease in any kind of public health issues that you would have from cannabis that's bought historically on the illicit market. So I think what we're starting to see is more conversations around opting back in, which is really positive, especially when you consider that every county in New Jersey voted majority in favor of question 1 in 2020, which is truly historical and something to be incredibly proud of for New Jersey. But I think, when you think about cannabis, it's a plant that was subjected to years of prohibition. And as a result, so many myths and misnomers about it. And it's going to require a lot of education, especially when it comes to welcoming regulated legal sales. And that's going to have to come from consumers and from prospective license holders. I talk to town leaders, but they want to hear from those who are voting for them. So, I implore anyone listening who is interested in buying cannabis in their own town or who wants to open up a license in their own town to reach out to their town councils. They'll listen to you. If you're looking for resources, I can recommend wmpolicy.com. We have a really wonderful fact sheet about what it means to welcome cannabis businesses in New Jersey. So as I was saying, I think we're going to start to see a shift. And when it comes to, you had asked about urban centers, you think about cities, we did see a large majority of cities in New Jersey decide to opt in. That's not universal though. You see cities like Patterson, where there's a discrepancy between both the city council and the mayor, where not both are aligned and ready to welcome adult use sales. That's very similar to the city of Orange as well as Camden. But when you think about Jersey City and Newark, they are excited and ready to embrace legal cannabis sales. And I think as a result, you're going to start seeing some foot traffic over from New York. And you're also going to see, as I mentioned, the jobs and the tax revenue coming sooner than to the cities that don't take advantage of that first mover advantage and they hop on the train for legal sales later. When it comes to access to transportation, I think that's essential to running a working business. And when you think about cultivators and manufacturers, I would imagine they would prioritize being off of the turnpike and major highways. Whereas if you're looking to open a retail dispensary, access to points of public transportation, downtown areas, we had mentioned earlier, there's definitely some issues with zoning, but where retail dispensaries can be placed in popular downtown areas near points of public transit or just off of a highway is going to be really critical to getting consumer access.
Terrific. And remind our audience out there, if you originally decided to opt out as a municipality, you can change your mind at any time.
Absolutely. And I think, it was staggering to see some of those headlines initially, close to 70% of municipalities in New Jersey opting out. That's not permanent. And like I mentioned, I would implore anyone listening to really reach out to their town councils. They're responsive to you. You vote for them. This isn't a be-all deadline. I joke all the time, just watch the movie Footloose, things change. So reach out to your town council, educate them. There's tons of resources out there. And I think in time, we're going to see more towns opt back into retail sales in New Jersey than we have today.
And weedmaps.com does provide some guidance. If I log in, tell our audience what they get off weedmaps.com.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you head to weedmaps.com, our app right now in New Jersey, it's probably not the most exciting since it's just really for medical users today, but soon you'll be able to find your local dispensary, deals that they're running. It's a really great resource to find all things cannabis. And then if you go to WM Policy, we also have a number of really helpful policy papers and resources that you can use, again, for that education piece. The last thing I'll mention is if you go to weedmaps.com/learn, if you're a newbie to cannabis, I know so many of us are, there is no shortage of information on there, from everything about the science of how this works to the different methods of consumption to, just how to roll a joint. So it's a really wonderful resources that I would welcome everyone to check out.
Lizzie, thank you so much for that insight. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
And again, great stuff. The bottom line, cannabis industry is on its way in New Jersey. So brace yourself. It's going to change the landscape sooner than later, as we heard from our panelists. And I'll again, thank you to the Botanist, our sponsor, and for sponsoring this Facebook Live event. And again, we have time for some questions. If I have my panelists stand by here and provide their insight and expertise again to some of our readers with some questions. And we have a question now coming from Mary Smith. She says she's a senior citizen who lives in a senior citizen community. My granddaughter is 23 years old, and they are not going to consider people like me. Smoking is not allowed in my community. And is she just out of luck in the senior citizen community if they don't allow it? Cannabis, recreational cannabis. What does anybody have any expertise on that?
Yeah, I
Go ahead, Suzette.
Yeah, I can chime in on that. So even though, obviously cannabis is legal, private property owners can restrict cannabis on their property. So it's unfortunate, but if that's the policy of the community, then, it's just, yeah, they have that right to restrict it.
They do. Okay. And again, we have another question on, this might be for Rob. You're an expert on this. Will medical cannabis go down in price when the recreational adult cannabis market opens? Will we see any price fluctuations here?
That's definitely a question for Brian. But what we have seen,
Brian can take on.
But what we have seen is that certainly the taxes will go down, and often there are provisions for lower prices for medical patients.
Yeah.
And you want to answer that, please?
Yeah, to Rob's point, and we just go back to our friend, the senior citizen too. There are other forms of cannabis that she can consume that don't require smoking. So capsules, lozenges, tinctures, things like that. So it might be something for her to consider, for her needs. To taxes, yeah, right. I mean, right now, the medical marijuana program has a 2% tax being levied that will be revoked in June. And then there's a series of recreational taxes that are going to lay on top of the recreational products. So in and of itself, with those tax differentials, there's going to be a swing of prices by 6-7% right there, 8% if you take out the medical tax that's currently in there. So, I think it's going to be what the market will bear, and each business entity has to make a business decision in regards to pricing as to where that's going to land.
A couple consumers want to know, Brian, are edibles going to be sold when the market opens up? I guess edibles, and then what are the options to consume cannabis besides smoking it?
Yeah, I mean,
Great questions.
For those following along, in their CRC Bible, section 11.5 is the forms of current products: syrups, pills, tablets, capsules, chewable forms. It does not talk about, depending on how you define edibles. A lot of people think a chewable capsule or a gummy is edible, right? So those are currently available. There hasn't been any conversation about kind of expanding beyond that form factor. I think that will come in time with it. There's no conversation about beverages yet. I think that we've seen the popularity of those in other markets across the country. Certainly our company's involved with that out west. So I think we'll see those things coming in the future as the I mean, this is me just speaking, not from any real great data set, but as the market evolves, I think we've seen in just about everything we do that we lag a little bit behind what happened on the West Coast, right? So as the popularity of those things move to the East Coast, we'll see the relaxation of regulations to adopt some of those particular form factors.
Here's another question. It's a good one. Is there a limit to what a consumer can buy when they show up at the Botanist, say?
Yeah, for a recreational consumer, it'll be 1 ounce. And I think Rob referred to this earlier that, it may be that we would have to set limits based on, as I talked about smart inventory management, they can get up to 1 ounce in the current regulations. And our medical patients can get up to 3 ounces for 30-day supply.
And again, this could be to any of our experts here, but Doug Haddad wants to know, how is the state going to ensure that each individual customer in the state is I guess, served? I guess this is, he wants to ensure there's enough supply, I guess, again. Anybody tackle that one? Rob?
Sorry about that. It's just a question of ramping up what we have going. So people are trying to get their cultivations going. The bigger operators are expanding their operations. They're figuring out ways to grow more product. So basically, in the short term, there will be a few shortages. There will be some glitches, but we will catch up. I mean, the nice part is that licenses are being granted, cultivators are growing. It is all moving very quickly. So he just has to be patient. But yes, everyone will be served in time.
Terrific. And I'll do one more question here, but it's, again, it's a product offering question from Abad Medina Saeed. Will pre-rolls be accepted for manufacturers to distribute? That seems to be a manufacturing question.
Yes, we actually offer those now in 2 different sizes. So yes.
The pre-rolls.
Correct.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you so much for answering these questions. And again, thank you for this panel. That concludes our program today. Thank you all for joining us and our experts and our sponsor, The Botanist. If you'd like to be the first to know about future programs like this, click the link in the chat to sign up for updates. We host events on a wide variety of topics. And the good news is most of them are free to our audience to attend. Have a great rest of your day. And again, thank you from the bottom of my heart to all the panelists for a great show.